friends. Welcome to The Porch. I'm Lindsay Baccardo, keynote speaker and virtual presenter for organizations who want to build strong, emotionally intelligent, and psychologically safe teams. Now, I believe that the modern day leader has a moral obligation to keep growing personally and lead others from a grounded and healthy and healed place. And so you're going to hear me bring on experts from all different fields: psychology, neuroscience, storytelling, emotional intelligence researchers, really anyone that can help us grow as leaders, both personally and ultimately impact the culture of our organization. This is where I bring on my favorite thought leaders on these types of topics to teach and mentor us through our own growth. And today is no different. We've got a very special episode of The Porch because it's going to hit both our personal life and our professional life. And big picture, it's this idea: all of us are getting older. Surprise! And the younger generations at work are going to start thinking about, how am I going to take care of my parents as they get older, as they age? And so I'm bringing on my dear friend, Scott Sutherland, and we're going to be talking about something that I know every millennial is thinking about. How am I going to talk to my aging boomer parents, and how am I going to take care of them and make sure they have what they need? And I know organizations as well are thinking about, how do we support our staff who now have a caretaker role? So here he is, my friend Scott. Scott, you have been building into people for a very long time. It's safe to say you've been building into people for decades. That's really what your career has been about. And now you have this interesting, very interesting position that you've been in the last year, 18 months. And it all started with your mother-in-law. It changed the trajectory of your career. Can you tell us a little bit of the story of how you got to this point that you're at today as a trainer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I love The Porch, and I love you, Linz. And so thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you.
Honestly, it even goes back to my grandparents. So I'll be brief, and I'll get to the story of my mother-in-law, because that really became very concentrated in this journey to where I am now, working in senior living and training people how to care for seniors and all of that. But, I can think back to when I was just a young kid, and the relationship I had with my grandparents was so awesome. And then when they started to get older, I had the privilege of watching my mother and her sister, my favorite aunt, start to take care of my grandfather, who was getting sick. And while I was not in conversations around, things like who is their power of attorney, and, which ended up being my mother and all that, I would hear some of those things sort of along the way. But being able to watch my mother and my aunt literally roll their sleeves up, caring for my grandfather in his home as he was getting sick, going back and forth to hospitals and all of that. As I got older and reflected back on that, it was very moving to me to see my own family caring for their parents. And so I have that, thankfully, in me, because I got to witness that.
Yeah.
And same was true when my grandmother, began to get sick as well, and watching my mother coordinate in-home care and all of that for her was just living many, many states away and coordinating all of that, was really fascinating and very, I was very proud of her for that. So fast forward to my mother-in-law, and my in-laws lived 5 minutes away from me and my wife, Emily. And Emily's dad, my father-in-law, he passed suddenly. He passed of a heart attack. We got a call one morning, and, boom, he was gone. And that really, I think, started for our family this whole realization that there wasn't anything in place for us to know how to move forward
What are we
So
doing, everybody? Happening.
literally, when my
Yeah.
father-in-law passed, we were, oh crap. What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
Who do we call? These kinds of things. And it was true for my mother-in-law even.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is that my father-in-law had moved from being, a 25 years pastor in local churches to working in funeral homes. And which he was fantastic at it. He was great at working with
Yeah.
families on preparing for their funerals and all that. Ironically, he did not have his own funeral planned. So
Oopsie.
we were literally in a place of feeling stuck. We didn't even know what funeral home he wanted to use.
Oh my.
We did not know where there were no burial plots. There was nothing. We were
Oh my.
literally starting from scratch. So we had to really band together
Mm-hmm.
and figure a lot of stuff out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the other side of putting my father-in-law to rest and getting through all those things and all the post things of that, my mother-in-law got to the point where she said, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get some things put in place, obviously naming her daughter, Emily, my wife, power of attorney, but then going through all of those necessary healthcare and financial documentation,
Mm-hmm.
in place so that if anything happened to her, Emily and her sister would have everything in place. They would know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that really started that whole process. Now, my mother-in-law ended up getting very sick. This would have been a couple years ago, and I was in between jobs,
Mm-hmm.
so I had the freedom of schedule to take her to doctor's appointments. As she continued to get sick, we'd have to take her to the emergency room, and we were quickly faced with this whole education of learning about senior living, even just the whole process of can she even still live alone?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
that's one of the realities that we all face with our parents, especially if we have parents that, hey, they're living independently, they're healthy, they're awesome. We don't normally think about, hey, mom and dad, let's sit down and have a conversation about what your wishes are as you get older and where you want to live. And, if
That's
you
right.
start to get sick, do you want to, all those things, which we can get into more here in a little bit. But um, I, I had to begin a real education around what is Medicare,
Mm-hmm.
what is Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
If she can do in-home care, what covers that?
Mm-hmm.
What covers senior living, especially if her resources are minimal,
Mm-hmm.
not a wealthy person at all, and just how to navigate that whole deal and all the legal documentation around that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have certain legal things in place, you are absolutely stuck in terms of what you can do to help care for your parents.
Yeah. That's right.
So it was a fast education on all of that. Thankfully, I had a good friend who is in the hospital network locally here where we live, and he is a geriatric social worker, and he knows all those things. And
Wow.
I have gleaned so much, and it still can make me very emotional at times to think about that time and how he came and sat down with our family and said, you need this, and this is what those things mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just frantically, just on my notes app on my phone, just taking,
Yeah.
which I still have, to this day, and I'm sharing this, you know, um, with as many people as I can.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
So you've lived this out. You've lived out what every single person is going to live out, which we
yeah.
never really want to talk about. We don't want to think about. It's this
Hmm.
idea that our parents, whether we are close to them or we're estranged from them, doesn't really matter. They're
Yeah,
going to continue to age and they will need representation and support. And we typically, what I hear you saying is that a lot of times we don't think about it until we're in the position of needing to make decisions.
right,
And
right.
so after Emily's mom passed, you made a conscious choice to switch gears and to really help other people who are in a similar position. It seems like this really grew your heart and your empathy for other people who are going through this stage of life.
It really did, because one of the realities, and this is what happens when our parents are getting to the point where their health is, failing,
Mhm.
whether it's cancer, whether it's, any type of just, you think about dementia,
Yep.
early onset Alzheimer's, full blown Alzheimer's, all of that. When you're getting into the thick of all of that, where your parents cannot take care of themselves anymore, um, it is all encompassing.
Mhm.
Even if you do have things in place, it is physically, mentally, emotionally exhausting.
Mhm.
It just is, because
Oh,
now, and
absolutely.
you can be doing it with the most joy and love. You may have had an incredible relationship with your parents along the way, but especially if you are you know, if you're young, you've got your own career, uh, middle age, your own career, kids, you put kids in the mix, you have your own family to care for,
Mhm.
but then you're also, caring for your parents. So, yeah, so it has become a real passion of mine to begin having conversations and hopefully share some tools and some things that I've just learned along the way and that we've learned as a family,
Yep.
because I personally don't know of an entity out there that is having these conversations and providing resources, other than like what I, found when we were going through it all.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, now I have a mother. She's single, and she's still independent, and and doing well. But she lives on her own, several states away, and we started having these conversations with her
Mhm.
to say, "Hey, mom, um, you know, maybe we should sit down and talk a little bit about, you know, what your wishes are as you continue to move into retirement, all of that." Um, and there's some different ways to go about it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it seems like too there's a reason that no one really wants to talk about this. There's reasons why it's hard to like okay. So Scott,
yeah,
what you're telling me is I'm going to while my parents are still independent, healthy, I could over mashed potatoes at Christmas or Easter or whatever. I could say, "So, mom and dad, how's everything going? Great, 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 great. What are your wishes when you die?" That's how my
yeah.
brain
Okay.
turns this
I know.
conversation into a cartoon.
Yeah,
It's very hard.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
wonder if that and what you've shared with me before that really stuck out to me was if you don't have these conversations when your parents are 100% like able to have them, if you wait too long, the it's the same as getting into a car accident without insurance. This is something that but this is inevitable. And you're headed towards a situation where very strategic decisions will need to be made for their emotional well-being, their financial well-being. It's like the car accident is going to happen and you're just like, insurance is kind of you're rolling the dice. And that's really for every human because I hate to say it right here live on this podcast for the first time we all are going to die. And it's such a scary thing for humans to think about. And so I hear you saying, Linz, if this is something that you can either face now when your parents have their resources and their faculties, or you can wait and it's going to get exponentially harder to take care of them.
Right. Yeah, you're so right. And yes, the the thought of sitting down with your parents to have this conversation can cause tremendous anxiety
Yeah.
because of what their reaction might be.
You just want me
You
to
know,
die so you can have my money.
exactly.
I'm just going to say what I think.
So, no, it's the truth. It is the absolute truth. And,
Yeah.
and even thinking about my own mother, you know, she's a very private person.
Yeah.
So understanding that, we might be entering into, just some holding things very close to the chest and all of that. But I want to go back because this is a shift in mindset as the adult children. This is not about, hey, we need to get some insurance in place in case they die. This is, and I think what I hope will become a culture shift is this idea of our parents have gone our whole lives caring for us because that's been their job, that's been their wish, that's been what they planned. Now, granted, disclaimer here, not everybody has an amazing relationship with their parents through adulthood. I get that for sure. And there's all kinds of challenges and situations that, cause friction and all of that. However, I think we as adult children have a great opportunity to help communicate to our parents that we want to do everything that we can to now help you finish your life well and make sure that we are honoring, what you want the rest of your life to look like and support you in that.
It's a very different way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you're talking about sitting down with them, anyone who's listening to the porch right now and our conversation, you may know of friends, or you may have heard of other people that you work with that have hit similar, stages, or even think back about your own families and people who have passed in your family and maybe what those situations have been. You can even start a conversation with your parents to say, hey, I heard this guy on this program.
Yeah.
And he talked about this, this, and this. And, I think it would be a really good idea, especially, at this stage of both of our lives, to sit down and let's talk about some of these things and just make sure that I'm supporting you in the way that you need to be supported as you continue to move, closer to retirement, into the rest of your life, because I want to do everything that I can to make sure that I'm honoring what your wishes are.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as you say that way too, that if we come to the table with this attitude shift, with this perspective shift, our parents can also sense that. They can sense like, hey, this has been on my heart. I want to make sure that you feel taken care of. I want to honor you. You helped, you grew me up from nothing to who I am today. You literally created me from nothing. Now it's my job to make sure that you feel really good about this season of your life. Like, imagine what a huge shift that is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I would say even the most private and controlling parent that we can have out there. And I, in full disclosure, again, my mother, extremely independent woman, holds everything very close to the chest. It's been very interesting as she has gotten older, how much gratitude she begins to express on, our life together, just as we have grown as her kids, my sister and I, and it has grown into this very sweet relationship now where she is beginning to express more need for our support and time with us.
Hmm.
and, and those kinds of things. And so I share that to say, even the hardest of parents that we have typically are going to get to the point where they are going to need help and they're
Yeah,
going to need care. They may not want to admit that right now, but if we begin these conversations sooner than later of making sure that critical things are in place, then the care for them is going to be more effective.
that's right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of
and
sense.
and I would take this another step further in speaking with organizations. I love how organizations have become more and more intentional around providing benefits for maternity, increasing maternity leave, paternity leave, adoption, really focusing on some of these very key aspects that are all time consuming. I think organizations have a real opportunity to do a very similar thing for employees that are in this caregiver role,
Hmm.
and providing the kind of benefits that help them feel truly supported. Because again, I cannot emphasize enough here that when you enter this stage with your parent, talk about a role shift. um,
Truly.
it is mentally, emotionally, physically exhausting. It just is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, this phrase comes to mind that we talk a lot about when we talk about generations, and it's will you be the leader that you never had? And some of us listening are going to have to be the caretaker that we never had.
That's very true. That's a great point.
How would you
Absolutely.
how would you coach somebody if they came to you and said, "Scott, my parents were neglectful and I don't feel super connected to them. Why should I bother asking them these 10 questions that you sent me? I don't Why should I bother?" How would you help somebody? How would you coach somebody through that if they're feeling kind of stuck?
Yeah. I would I would share with you exactly what I have done,
Mhm.
what my wife has done, and that is really seek out good therapy.
Mhm.
Good therapy, because whether the reality is that someone in the family is going to have to be the person who makes critical decisions
Mhm.
for that parent.
Yeah.
And whether that's you or a sibling,
Mhm.
again, and if you do have siblings, honestly, I think it's good to have a conversation with siblings first
Mhm.
to say, hey, you know, I've been learning some information that I'd never thought about.
Yep.
Um, I believe it's time that we have, start thinking about having conversations with mom and dad. Would love, for you to join me, in this. The reality is that we all have had different experiences with mom and dad or whatever, whatever. Um, I would like for us to, do this together if at all possible. But for those who, have had a very difficult conversation with their parents, and even as you're even going through everything, when you're in the thick of the process and caring for your parents, it's important to get the help that you need to talk through the pain and the struggle and all of that.
Mhm.
But for parents who maybe have not been the best parents to us,
Mhm.
they are going to hit a place of mortality,
Mhm.
and there's going to be all kinds of emotions that they're going to have around that. They may have regret, they may express feelings of regret. um, and I know I personally have had to come to grips with some of my own challenges with my mother, even as we're going through this process now, to
Yep.
realize, you know, there's nothing I can do or say that's going to change her. And to all of a sudden, all these things, she's going to just go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I did this, 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 and this, and this.
Yeah, you would. Yeah,
It's just not probably going to happen. If it
yeah,
does, beautiful, incredible, incredible. But I think still we have an opportunity to change the
mm-hmm,
relationship
mm-hmm.
for the better, and give an even greater opportunity maybe to even have some of those conversations at the end of their life, because you are taking this position of, I want to make sure that you're well taken care of
Yeah,
at the end of your life. So we all have different expectations of what we hope will happen,
yeah,
depending on what our relationship has been. But I think the challenge that I would put out there is that, um, while we can't go back and change the past, we can definitely make a difference for what the future will look like with our parents.
yes. Yeah, when you're a kid, you don't really have a lot of power in this relationship. And now recognizing I do have a lot of power, how do I want to use it? Who do
Yeah.
I want to be? And what I've seen you do, which is so admirable, is staying true to yourself. I'm going to stay true to myself. This is hard. And I think for anybody who's kind of figuring out how to navigate this with their parents, it's like, I want to be the type of person that my parents know they can depend on me regardless of the past, regardless of how private they are, regardless of anything. This is who I am. I'm somebody who's going to be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real choice that everybody has to make.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Yeah. Agreed.
And what I love is that, when we were originally talking about this, I was asking you, is there a tool? Is there something that you can build for people so that they can start to process, how would I have this conversation? And so I love this. You came up with this 10 questions to ask your aging parents, and it's available. We're going to put the link right in the show notes so you can grab this. But what I love is that you've gone through and really, because you've lived this out and now you work in this industry that supports seniors, senior living facilities. You have a really unique angle on the topics that need to be talked about. And so I just wanted to kind of talk through this document a little bit that you made for anybody who needs it. You can grab it at the link in the show notes. But, the first question that comes up, Scott, that I think is so hard to imagine. I'm like pretending you're my dad for a minute. Like, what are your wishes for the end of your life? Oh, how's Chuck Norris on this show that you love? Very cool. What are your wishes for the end of your life? How would how it's a great question. It needs to be asked. There's so much inner resistance. How do you even start to kind of break down your own resistance to talking about this, especially if you're afraid your parents are going to get upset? Do you have any tips for how to jump into these questions?
Yeah. Really, the first thing that I would say is that, um, being able to get ahead of this with your parents, to say, again, I've been learning about just this reality of making sure that, certain legal documents are in place, as you continue to, move towards retirement. Of course, this depends on what the age of your parents are at this point.
Totally.
And,
Yep.
if your parents are 40, sure, if you want to have this conversation, that's great. But you kind of do have to feel that out a little bit.
Yep.
But again, having these conversations in a way as to say, I know this is probably going to sound like I'm coming out of left field on this.
Oh,
And
that's good.
most importantly, I want you to know that I am just learning some things that I never thought about as your kid. As you continue to move closer to retirement, I'm learning that there's some important stuff that needs to be put in place in case anything happens to you, and I want to be able to help make decisions, for you if you were to get sick or anything like that. So would you be willing to just sit down together and talk about some things?
Mm.
I've got I've got some questions that I'd really love to ask you about. And you know what, mom and dad, you may already have this stuff in place and I just don't even know it.
Yeah.
And
Ooh,
so
this
this
is
might be
good.
an opportunity that where you can help me understand what you already have in place or what you're hoping to do. And then we can kind of be together on it, because the thing that would absolutely wreck me and scare me to death is if something happened to you and I would have no idea where to go or what to do to help make medical decisions for you, financial decisions for you. This is about me just trying to gain more understanding of how to support you. So I'm sorry if this feels like it's out of nowhere. I don't want anything from you other than to just make sure that I am caring for you as you continue to, move into retirement and move through the rest of your life. And to me, this would be a great time to have a conversation.
That's really good. It's fascinating what you said at the beginning was basically ask for consent to have this conversation. Like, would you be open to this conversation? So before you even dive into saying like, do you have a funeral planned? You can actually just start with, hey, I've been thinking about, your
Do you want to
life.
be buried or cremated?
Yeah. Where do you have a burial plot chosen yet?
Right.
Where do you want to be? Under a tree in a field? That's really good. Are you open to
Yeah.
this conversation? Because the last thing I want to have happen is anything happen to you and I'm not prepared. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
prepared to actually take care of you. So I think that's brilliant. Just starting, and your parents may say, you know what, I don't really want to talk about that. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
I know. Now we can come back to it 6 months from now, a year from now. And what were you going to say?
No, you're exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up, because many of you out there will get that. You'll get pushback. Be like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right.
Yep.
Well, and I think a good follow up with that would be, okay, I completely understand. I know that just feels, out of nowhere, but just know that these are some of the things that are on my mind, because I want to make sure that I'm able to support you well,
Yeah.
as you move through life. So whenever you're ready and you feel comfortable, I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. That's really good
And
because
and then let go.
you planted the seed.
Yes.
It might take them some time to get their head around what the heck is happening.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you put the precursor in too. Is like, I know this might feel like it's coming from left field. Like just letting them know, like, you probably weren't thinking we were going to talk about this, and I'm acknowledging that. And would you be open to talking about it? I think that's
Yes.
brilliant. That's
Yep.
brilliant. And you put together this very well, just very clear document about the top 10 questions you want to ask, both as your parents get older and they just need some medical support at some point, and then legal support and financial support. So when you think about this document that you made, is there one question that pops up to you that is most important? If you've never talked to your parents about this before, what question, if there is one, is the most like top of mind for you when you think about the things that you need to talk about with your parents?
Well, I think number one,
Yeah.
especially,
Oh,
and
it's like
that's
you put
why.
these in order. That's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
Lindsay, number one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that is really about their well-being,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's really how do you want the rest of your life to look?
Yep.
Yes, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And that's, there's so many layers to that. When we think about like adult psychology and aging, just being able to say, what are your end of life wishes? What's very important to you? What do you want to make sure is in place for you?
Yes. And I would say, as you walk through this document, don't get hung up on the technicality in all of
Mm-hmm.
it. I tried not to make it too technical, but more, enough information that, gives you some knowledge around it, but not getting too in the weeds. I would say, do some of your own research
Yep.
because there's a lot of information available on each of these things, particularly in your own states.
Yep.
And every state has some different laws, so just be mindful of that around each of these legal documents that you have to have in place.
Yep.
But in general, having the knowledge around each of these questions and then making them your own. There's going to be some things that as you read through this,
Yep.
you're going to think of some variations in these to ask your parents that will be more fitting for them in their personality, their estate, the way they live. You might already know some things about, hey, do they want to sell their house and find a independent living community that,
Yep.
do you want to go down to the villas in Florida?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Do they have bingo? I'm in.
Yes. So you might think of some things and you can even just make some notes there that might be more customizable for your parents. But this document is a starter
Yep.
for people, especially if this is not an area that you have delved into even mentally yet.
Yep. I think that's brilliant. There's so much to read through here. There's so much to think about, just how you want to consciously lead your parents in this season of life. And I'm so glad that you put this together. 10 questions to ask your aging parents. We'll make sure that the link is in show notes so that folks can grab it and read through it themselves. Your contact information is there as well. And I'm sure that some people will want to get a hold of you and have a conversation around, how can I do this? Can you coach me through it? Or we're midway through this and I need some support. And I think it's an awesome opportunity for us to all think about, how can we lead our family and our parents in this season of life. So thank you for taking the time to put this together and to come on the porch to talk about it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, we will see you next time on the porch. Hey, grab this document. Even if you're not sure you want to talk about these types of questions, end of life questions with your aging parents, they do need your support in this way. And Scott said it best. This is also a great time to grab a therapist, put some people on your life team that can support you as you continue to become the leader that you're destined to be. We'll put the link in show notes. You'll have it right there for you. Thanks for being on the porch, Scott. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks.